please hit me up through Facebook Messenger and I will gladly send you the link. And it's a link to Pop's Party People, which is our group. And if you would like to donate, please donate to the cause.
Yeah, just one quick note about that. So I've been involved with the ALS Association. I actually got involved because a friend of mine's father, Pop, passed away of ALS. And since then, it's actually affected my family as well. But in working with the ALS Association of North Carolina, one thing that's really impressed me, especially as a libertarian, is that they're almost entirely privately funded. And the donations they get and those donations that they receive go to first assisting people and families who have ALS, because obviously with any neurodegenerative disease, there's a lot of equipment like wheelchairs and ramps that are needed. So they're a they're a nonprofit organization that is making a difference in the lives of people with ALS. They also fund a lot of research with the Duke ALS Clinic that's made some significant strides to help to find a cause and cure for ALS. So if you don't think that medical research can be privately funded, I'm here to tell you you're wrong, because the ALS Association is doing it. So as a libertarian, there's a lot to like about ALS, and obviously if it's affected someone you know, someone you love, then this is a cause that you should be behind.
Yes. See either Ken or Patrick if you want to get involved.
There was also one thing I wanted to bring up and mention. I don't know if anybody saw the news yesterday with Ryan Nassib, who plays for the Oakland Raiders. He actually came out as openly gay and donated $300,000 to the Trevor Project, which is an advocacy group that prevents suicide in LGBTQ youth. And we've done a video in the past for suicide awareness for the Trevor Project, and they shared and liked our video. But that was, I think it's good to see a professional athlete actually put their money where their mouth is and stop being kind of a talking head. And I wanted to bring that up.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Patrick and Ken. Thank you so much for coming out. My name is Travis Grew, the newly elected chair of WakeLP. We have a very special guest tonight who is a very good friend of mine, Jonathan Blitz. And it's a funny story. When they first started their distillery, I don't know if you knew this or not, but I drive for Old Dominion Freight Line. And I actually delivered their very first wooden barrels to the distillery. And it was maybe 10 or 12 barrels. And I was like, this place is really, really, really cool. I mean, these people are amazing. And ever since then, we've become friends. I've showed up in the winter time and they've thrown snowballs at me while I'm making deliveries. They throw whatever they have at me. Food. Mike throws food at me all the time. I'll show up and they'll be having lunch and they'll invite me to have lunch. And I don't know if you knew this or not, but or if you were there, we also hosted 2 events there because of our friendship and because of just how kind that Jonathan and Mike are, the 2 owners of Mystic Farm and Distillery. Because of their kindness, we actually hosted 2 of the largest libertarian events this state has ever seen. And Patrick and I worked on this. We had both Joe Jorgensen and Spike Cohen separately at this event. And it was because of their kind generosity that we were able to do that. Joe parked her big bus over there. We had just a really fantastic time. But before I introduce you to Jonathan, we have an event in July. On July 14th, we have John Sanders of John Locke Foundation coming to talk to us specifically about nuclear power and probably some about the coal ash cleanup that's been a disaster and been extremely expensive, but mainly about nuclear power and the benefits that it provides and how it's actually cost effective. And 33% of our state actually runs on nuclear power. So that's on July 14th. If you can please tell your friends about that, invite your friends, this stuff without money. So every little bit helps. So With that said, I would like to introduce one of my really, really good friends and liberty advocates, Jonathan Blitz of Mystic Farm and Distillery. Thank you so much, buddy.
I'm gonna grab my laptop.
Yep, do that. We thank you so much for coming. Also, please tip the waitress and the bartenders well. This place has been really good to us, and we want to be kind and courteous and give back and be gracious for their generosity of letting us meet here every single week. We're here every Wednesday, by the way. So if you want to come out and talk shop, talk sports, talk relationships, or whatever, we're here every Wednesday from 7 to 9. We're usually over here. About once a month, we do an event either up there or here or in this room. So please come out, tell your friends, and we'd love to have you, love to chat, love to talk about liberty and freedom and the libertarian movement. And if you're interested in running for office, also please come talk to myself or Brad Hessel, who's going to be a key person in the 2022 election cycle. So come talk to us. And with that said, Jonathan, you have the mic. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, brother. Thank you very much. I'm gonna start by telling you a little bit about our business, and then I'm gonna spend the majority of the time telling you about some litigation that would have been a lot more fun had our license not been on the line. As Travis mentioned, we started our distillery in back in 2013. Actually, we started making a liqueur product, and we started making that in downtown Durham. We're very fortunate that we built our distillery on top of a fantastic natural gift, which is the Triassic Basin aquifer. We have great water for making whiskey. This is one of North Carolina's natural treasures. We had a huge budget for water treatment when we started our distillery, and we drilled down and found absolutely fantastic water. And all of this is a way to preface what I fervently believe, which is that North Carolina is the best place in the world to make bourbon whiskey. And a lot of people don't associate North Carolina with bourbon, even though we have superior water and grain and aging climate. And the reason for that is that Prohibition came to this state in 1908, which many of you might know is 12 years before the rest of the country. We were first in the nation, in the South, for Prohibition. And in 1907, we were a leading distillery state. We were one of the largest producers of distilled spirits in the country. And every winery, every brewery, and every distillery was put out of business with the stroke of a pen in 1908. It did not become legal again to have a distillery. There was no such thing as a distillery permit under North Carolina law until 1979. We didn't actually get our first distillery until 2005. So even though it was on the books as something you could do, nobody had ever actually tried it. And that, of course, means that not a drop of distilled spirits was made in this state from 1908 until, excuse me, NASCAR. We actually were #1 in distilled spirits production all through Prohibition. We were the #1 spirits producing state. So it just goes to show you, people are going to do what they want to do, right? The other thing we have is we have superior grain. This part of North Carolina, the Piedmont, has two really excellent growing seasons. We grow 100% of the grain that we use to make whiskey. Unfortunately, the land where the distillery is isn't very conducive to farming. It hasn't been farmed in a generation. We're working on the soil there, but we grow on about 100 leased acres out in Hillsborough. And that's really important to us to have that great local source for grain. We have control over every aspect of the production. Let's see. The final thing I would say is we have the world's best aging climate for barreled spirits. And the reason for that is the natural climate that we have here. We have days when it's 85 degrees in the afternoon, and then we'll have a 40-degree night. And each one of these oak barrels that you see here, and we have about 300 of those aging at any given time. Each one of those barrels is a living thing. It's breathing. And essentially, when the temperature goes up, the whiskey inside the barrel swells up, expands, the air inside the barrel pressurizes, and it pushes the whiskey deep into that oak. And then if the temperature cools down, the reverse will happen and the whiskey will come back out of the oak into the center of the barrel. It'll actually pull a negative pressure. It'll pull a partial vacuum. And that's really wonderful because it pulls all of the flavor out of that oak back into the whiskey. And it takes about 4 to 5 years to produce a good barrel of whiskey. And I always like to tell people too, each one of those barrels, you don't see an oak barrel, see 6 or 7 acorns that fell in the right places a century ago. Each one of those barrels is going to produce different whiskey because each one of them is made of different trees, and each one of those trees had about 100-year life. We take a lot of pride in what we do. We do things the hard way. I don't think there's any harder way to do what we do. I was mashing today, and I came home just looking like, you know, someone had dipped me in flour and rolled me in oats. It is a very labor-intensive process, and we do everything the right way. We taste everything when it's coming off the still. We smell it. That's how we make our cuts. I hope sometime you'll come out and take a tour. It's a really fascinating process. We have a couple of different products. I don't want to spend too much time talking about it. I do want to tell you that North Carolina spirits are among the best in the world. We just won a gold medal at the San Francisco World Spirits Competition. This is the most prestigious competition in the world. We beat brands like Eagle Rare, Weller, Willett, Buffalo Trace. We beat all of those folks. And this is a blind tasting. You can't influence the judging at all. You just send your bottle in and, you know, light a candle and hope it's good stuff. And so I believe that this state, you know, it will be known for craft beer because we have good craft beer here, but we'll never be a great wine producing region. But we can reclaim our mantle as producing the finest whiskeys in the world. And I hope to be part of that. I want to switch over now and tell you, let's see. I want to tell you a story that starts with somebody coming out to visit our distillery. Let's see. I apologize. So I'm using a deck that I use to present to the Distillers Association of North Carolina. I'm going to give you a little background. So we're a very heavily regulated business. The first permit you have to make spirits comes from the federal government. It's called a distilled spirits plant permit, a DSP, a basic permit. And you get that, and then you walk into the state of North Carolina, because under Article 2 of the 21st Amendment, which repealed prohibition, states are given control over what happens within their borders. That's why we have such a patchwork around the United States and such a fractured, fragmented market. And remember, I said at the beginning, people are going to do what they want to do. There are hundreds of thousands of bottles of liquor being shipped into this state every month, and all of it's illegal, and people are still doing it because they want to buy those spirits that they can't buy here, or they're paying too much here, and they're going to do it. So anyway, as a distilled spirits plant, we have our building, and it's permitted by both the state of North Carolina and the federal government. The state of North Carolina, you may be familiar with the ABC system, and the ABC system actually has multiple parts. There's the ABC Commission that does things like permitting and making rules and setting policy. Then there's ALE agents, and they go out and enforce the law. They're part of a different part of the Department of Public Safety. Sometimes they don't actually know what the law is, as you'll see here. Sometimes they decide what the law is when they're standing in your distillery. And then we have the ABC boards, which you all are probably most familiar with, which is the people you go to those state stores. It kind of feels like the Soviet post office, and they say things to you like, if we don't have it, you don't like it. Is that right? And they're very nice people, you know, speak clearly in any light bulb in my distillery, you can talk to them. What happened was, and we have bottles of liquor that we sell, and those are only the ones that we make. Those are the only ones we're allowed to sell. We have to produce it at the distillery. Then there are bottles that we, and we can make cocktails out of those too since September of 2019. So we can sell a bottle, we can make a bottle, and we can serve a cocktail with a bottle. And it's always been a tough thing for ABC to wrap their heads around because they think in terms of retail permits and commercial permits. So a few years ago, when we got the ability to sell bottles, they started to make up some rules. And there is a rulemaking process that they can go through, but they didn't really do that. They just started saying, well, you have a retail portion of your distillery and a commercial portion. And this trickled down to the ALE agents. And these are police officers. They have badges and guns, and they come out to your distillery and they say things like, hey, I'd really like to look at those beer receipts that you guys have from the distributor to make sure that you're buying beer from the right place. And so we'll present that to him. And he came in early November of 2019. This was before the pandemic. And I wasn't there. And he came in and he looked at the beer receipts and he walked into the kitchen area, which is behind our bar. And he walked around a little bit and then he left. And he came back about 2 weeks later. And he had with him an absolutely lovely young intern from NC State University, whose name nobody could find later on in the litigation. Nobody knew who she was. She just came and did an internship. Anyway, I don't know if he was showing off for her. I certainly wouldn't want to cast any aspersions on him. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you very much. Okay, so over the years, what's been happening is that the ALE agents have been going out to various distilleries and they've been seizing bottles of liquor made by other distilleries, right? So if you ran a distillery, I mean, my thought was I would put this ALE agent on the stand and say, Agent so-and-so, because I don't want to say his name. You can read it in the beautiful article that was written by John Trump and some of the other journalists who've covered us. Agent so-and-so, what should gin taste like, right? If you're going to make a gin, you're going to bet tens of thousands of dollars that consumers are going to like it. What should it taste like, right? And are you going to read books about it, or are you going to go out and buy some bottles of gin, right? And we are allowed to possess and transport into and out of the distillery the maximum amount of liquor, I'm quoting the law here, allowed under federal law as long as it's used in the distilling process. Well, I would argue to you that if you're going to use it in the distilling process, one of the things you're going to use it for is to benchmark your product against someone else's product. You're about to bet $30,000 that those barrels of whiskey that you're pulling out of your rick house are ready. Shouldn't you buy a bottle of Buffalo Trace and find out if you at least meet the minimum bar for a $35 bottle of bourbon, right? So and there are no rules on this. The ABC Commission did not make any rules. They just, this was the statute's out there. So this ALE agent came in. This is 2 weeks after he's already walked back in our kitchen. He knew those bottles were there. He didn't say anything about the bottles, but he walked into the kitchen. You can't miss him. There's a big shelf up. And he said, what are those bottles? I said, well, those are, spirits that we benchmark against. They're things I buy commercial quantities of. When you make gin, you buy a neutral spirit and you redistill it. We have a lot of private label customers. You all might have heard of Lone Rider Spirits. We pack all of their stuff. And so we have some commercial produced bulk bourbon, bulk whiskeys, bulk things like that. And I have bottles of that back there. And he decided he was going to seize all 17 bottles of spirits that were there, except for there were 2 bottles that weren't in consumer packaging. And I said, well, I have, 2,000 gallons of this thing that is produced by Pete Barger over in Statesville that I'm holding for a customer. Are you going to go into my rick house and seize that too? He says, no, that's not in consumer packaging. Now, I'm a practicing attorney. I don't practice that much anymore, but I will give you, I wouldn't call it legal advice. If you're pulled over by the side of the road by a police officer, having an argument about whether or not the speed limit was appropriately set by the legislature, not a good argument to have. So I just said, okay, do whatever you're going to do, and I'll talk about it with the ABC Commission. So he takes these bottles and his intern and goes along. And now, why did he pick our distillery to bring an intern to? Do you think he walked in the door that morning, maybe thinking he was going to see some liquor in front of her? I don't know. He could have just gone to a, corner grocery and audited their beer records, but this is a little sexier, don't you think? So he went back and he took the bottles, and I sent an email that night to the ABC Commission attorney. Unfortunately, she had gotten married in the year since I had sent her a previous email, and they didn't update or auto forward her email address from before. So she never got this email. It was a long email, and it explained, look, here's my legal rationale for possessing this. And why don't you tell me where you think I've got the law wrong? I hear nothing. COVID comes, little bit of a upheaval to our industry and everybody else in the world. And around May, the end of May, I got a certified letter. And I will tell you, it is extremely rare for you to get something good by certified mail. This is just my personal experience in the almost 50 years I have on this planet. One time I got something good. It's my wife's, the wedding ring, right? The wedding ring came by certified mail. That was good. You might as well sign for it because they're going to track you down and serve you anyway. So I get this certified letter, and it's from the ABC Commission, and it's what they call a notice of violation. It's 179 days to the day that he actually did that seizure. So it was around May 14th or some 17th, something like that. And it says, not Barrister and Brewer LLC, Jonathan Blitz broke the law. Made it personal. Now I have a law license, and if I admit to this violation, I'm also admitting to probably a class A1 misdemeanor, if not a felony. So there is no way I'm going to admit to this. So I call the attorney whose name, and it's a very nice little notice. It says, you can pay $1,000 fine and a 10-day suspension, or you can just pay the $1,000 and we'll make this go away. But you have to admit the violation. So I call up the attorney. There's an attorney's name on it. And I say, hey, I'm a lawyer. I own this distillery, and here's this thing. And basically the answer was, everybody admits the violation. Nobody ever challenges us. Pay the money and it'll go away. And by the way, I'll give you a break. It's a special today, $500. And no, you don't have to close your business. It's $500 this time. And I said, but can you show me where in the North Carolina general statutes or your rules, it says I can't possess these bottles? Because here's the statute that says I can. And this was the response I got, and I got this in writing. This is a culmination of several rules and statutes. Now, I happen to be a pretty well-read attorney. I've had a really stellar career. I'm very, very fortunate to have good jobs and a great education. I've never heard of something being a culmination. It either is the law or it isn't. And if it's a gray area, that's where you go to court and fight about it. This made no sense to me at all. And my BS detector went off. And I said, I really think this is a bad idea for you guys to pursue this. And what I found out in the subsequent weeks is that they have gone in month after month, year after year into 6 different distilleries in North Carolina and seized bottles of gin from a gin distillery, bottles of vodka. Oh, you have Tito's at your vodka distillery where you make vodka. Well, gee, if you're in the most cutthroat category in spirits, wouldn't you like to see how your stuff shapes up against Tito's? What are we supposed to do? Take it to our house, do a tasting, come back, change something, go back home? It's ridiculous. And it's also not the law. So I came back and I said, listen, I don't think this is a good idea. I can't stop you from pursuing this, but please consider it. I then went to the Distillers Association of North Carolina. I sat down with them and I said, look, guys, what do you think about this? Like, I wasn't on the board of DANK at that time. I've since become a little more politically and active in my industry since this experience. But yeah, it's a consciousness raising. And so I came to them and I said, what do you think? And they, for the nicest possible reasons, asked me not to rock the boat. In fact, the president of the association, with whom I think the best friendships start with some acrimony, right? You get into a little bit of a tussle and then you become really close friends. I think there's a Springsteen song about that. And he said, I'll pay the $500 for you. I'll write the check. Just let them do their thing. We're going to negotiate some new rules with them. And I said, well, this is ridiculous. And I said, I'll really think about, I actually told them I'd do it, which I hate to say that I did because you don't want to go back on your word. But I called them back up and I said, I just can't do this because number one, my insurance is going to go up every year from now on. Number two, we're making lots of sanitizer and I'm selling it to the federal government and I'm selling it to state governments. And in every single one of them, you have to issue a certification that you haven't broken the law and you haven't ever been disciplined for anything. And then I have to tell the truth, right? And then I'm an attorney, so I'm going to admit that this was a violation, but they did offer to change it to the company name if I would admit the violation. And then they said, you'll also have to take a training or do some training. And my wife said, well, you don't have time to train them, but I don't think that's what they had in mind. So I then sent an email to the head administrator at the time over at ABC, a very nice woman named Agnes Stevens. And I said, Agnes, I don't think you should do this. I don't think you should pursue this case. And I said, oh, go ahead. Please sit there. Agnes, here's what's going to happen. You're going to be put in the position of telling a court that every drop of spirits that was not distilled at a distillery is illegal. Not just the stuff that we're using for benchmarks, but you're going to have to follow that to its logical conclusion. And that includes all the barrels of whiskey that I bought on behalf of my clients to bottle up for them in North Carolina. And all the neutral spirit that's used by everybody in this state, from Krupnikas to Junior Johnson's Midnight Moon, the biggest producer in the state, or at least was for a while, they're all going to have to be deemed illegal. That's where this is going to go. And I said, I know this is a really hard ask. You run a huge bureaucratic organization, and I'm asking you to basically turn to your legal department and go, back off. It's a bad idea. She didn't listen to me. And the lawyer kept me every couple of days and saying, I'm really going to file this. And I said, I really hope you do, because I'm in a hurry. I'd like to get this put to bed. So on July 30th, and let me preface this, nobody ever stands up to the ABC Commission. And I want to put you're in the position of the typical distiller. You have mortgaged everything you have to build this distillery. You have gone without a paycheck for 4 or 5 years, putting every dollar you've made into your rick house, right? Because if you don't put up whiskey for 5 years from now, you're never going to sell anything 5 years from now. You'll be out of product, right? You have to put a barrel in every week at a cost of a few $1,000s, at least 1 barrel, maybe 2, because that's your growth plan, right? Maybe you're only selling a barrel a month now, but you got to stock up that supply chain. And somebody comes to you and says, look, we'll make this legal problem go away for $500 and a training, versus you go sit down with your nice attorney and he says, listen, man, I'm going to need a $10,000 retainer to do this case. And that's a nice price because it's a lot of work. And it's probably going to run more like 20 by the time we get through some real proceedings. I have 300 hours in the cases I settled with ABC. 300 hours. A nice attorney is going to bill you $200 an hour, right? Because they got an office and everything else they got to maintain, research fees, stuff like that. 60 grand, you're going to pay the money. You're going to make it go away. There's no point in standing up to the man. It will benefit you nothing. So they finally file this against me. And on the same exact day, not 2 days later, the same exact day, they issue what they call a set of policies. And these policies, guess what they say? You can't possess a bottle of somebody else's liquor in the tasting room part of your distillery, but you can possess it in the bonded area. Now, mind you, several of the people who were cited previously, the liquor was in the bonded area, right? It was in the federally bonded part of the distillery. So they didn't make that distinction before, but now they're going to make it, right? These are, and they put the word policy on it, but it says you shall do this, and you have 30 days to do this. And by the way, you also have to follow all the rules of mixed beverage permittees, which we got the legislature to take that out of the legislation, SB 290, which had passed about a year before, which they had never made rules for. So they filed this case against us. They issued these policies, and I looked at up to the sky and I said, thank you, God. Because the number one thing you want to do when someone accuses you of doing something wrong is make them into the bad guy. And this was so blatantly illegal, so obviously flawed. And I was sort of confident at the time, but I talked to a friend of mine who did a bunch of administrative law. He's like, oh, this is a slam dunk. Like, this is so great. And so we filed, initially I filed a counterclaim, and the judge was like, this is in a little administrative hearing division of the Office of Administrative Hearings. This is where you go when your license gets dinged for being a bad barber or a bad distiller or whatever, right? Plumbing violation or whatever. And the judge is like, well, we don't really have counterclaims here. So I was like, okay, well, and the beautiful thing is it costs $20 to file a suit, and it's all electronic. Like, you can sit in your home and for $20 you can harass people, right? And so I filed just like, 30 pages, just like hit him. And it was wonderful. And the judge loved it. So what ended up happening, and this is why it's illegal, they can't just make up the law, right? Under the North Carolina Constitution, if you're going to exercise the power of the state, you have to have the consent of the representatives of the people. And that's exactly what it says in Article 7 of the North Carolina State Constitution. The consent of the representatives of the people. That means bureaucrats can't just make up the law. So what the legislature created was this rulemaking process by which they propose rules and they get published, and there's a comment period, and the Office of Administrative Hearings considers it. And then eventually, if enough people object, it goes back to the legislature for disapproval, which is really great because it takes like 2 years, and it really makes these bureaucrats consider how much resistance is there really going to be for something. Now, that can be really perverse because big entrenched industries can go in and spend lots of money and grind things to a halt. But better, less government than bad government. So the commission took the position that these are just policies, right? They're just voluntary guidelines. And the attorney for the commission did some really bad things, like telling the judge that she was too busy to respond to the case, which is really a bad thing to do, especially when the court's like, hey, I'm going to do something before these are supposedly take effect on September 1st. So we had a hearing, and it was over Zoom, which is really bizarre. And an attorney who works as a part-time rulemaking guy for the ABC Commission said, Your Honor, we need this power. We have to be able to make these rules because it can take 2 years to make a rule. We've got rules we've been working on for 2 years. And I was just aghast at this. You can't just, yeah, you know what? Expediency is really, really not compatible with liberty, right? If you're going to have an ordered system of liberty, I realize, and I told the judge this, our constitutional system is expensive. It costs a lot of time and effort to have rights. It's really efficient to just have one guy make up the law and tell people what to do. That's why our businesses work better that way, right? We don't have, everybody just doing what they want. You come here, you go to work, you're making a deal. You're going to do what I tell you, or you're not going to work here because we got to get shit done. Government is different. So this was the first time anybody had called the commission on this. No one in the 50 years, or what is it? 1979, 40 years to that point, no distiller, because we didn't exist up till 2005, but in the years that there have been distillers in North Carolina, nobody ever said, hey, you can't just like walk in here and draw a line and say you can't have your liquor here. You have to actually make a rule. So the judge issued what's equivalent to a preliminary injunction. And basically what he said is, do not attempt to enforce these rules. The court's going to keep an eye on you. And eventually they agreed to a permanent injunction, which is basically saying we won't ever try to enforce these rules unless we go through rulemaking. And the judge said, fine. And then they said, well, the case is now moot. You need to dismiss it. And I said, I went back to the attorney and I said, listen, if you dismiss this violation, I'll drop everything. And in the meantime, in doing research for the case, I'd found some outdated rules that had become unlawful because of the passage of the legislation in the summer of 2019. And I went to the commission and I said, please go take those rules off the books. And the statute says, you shall commence rulemaking proceedings if you grant that petition. You write a letter and you say, please don't, make this go away. And they have to start making it go away. Otherwise, they've denied it. So they refused to, they said, we're going to think about it and figure out the right way to do it, but we're granting your petition. Here we go again, right? So I go back to court. Now we have 3 separate court actions going on. We have them telling me I broke the law, me having a judge agree that they actually broke the law, and saying, hey, it kind of looks like when you were saying Mr. Blitz broke the law, he broke the law that you made up that doesn't count. And then we have this third one now where I'm saying those rules are outdated. You need to update them. Oh yeah, we'll do that when we feel like it. That's illegal. You got to do it because I asked you to, all right? Now the Attorney General's office gets involved, okay? It's not just this one junior attorney over at the ABC Commission. Now the Attorney General comes in because they have to represent the state in Superior Court. And a very cordial, professional, I hope to be very successful, Assistant Attorney General took on the case. And for the first time, she said, Mr. Blitz, what do you want out of this litigation? It makes you want to cry, doesn't it? What do you want out of this litigation? 300 pages of documents have been filed up to this point. All I want you to do is dismiss the violation. Just get rid of it, and I will go away. Meanwhile, the judge in the injunction case is saying, I do not think this case is moot because Mr. Blitz still has a claim for attorney's fees. That's $50,000 at a shit billing rate, right? I got 250 hours. Just give me $200 an hour, okay? And I think those of you who've probably been in business or a regulated business know that the worst thing I could do for my future would be to try to actually collect that money. Like that would be a really stupid move. They would never forgive that. They would never forget it. And it's not classy, right? It's a lot of money though. It really is. So I said, look, I'll give everything up, just dismiss the violation. And the junior attorney pipes up and says, well, will you admit that violation and take a class? Really? I want to tell you that my prediction to Agnes came true, and they did set off what I consider to be the legal equivalent of a nuclear bomb for the distilling industry. If this was actually the law of North Carolina, the possession of spirituous liquor not distilled inside the distillery is not currently allowed under the law. You would put 30 to 40% of the distilleries in North Carolina out of business immediately. It would be over. Or what did I say? Half. And I think that this was a real turning point for the folks over at the Distillers Association, where they realized, wow, this is really getting crazy. But this is the logical extension of them trying to make up the law, right? And the statute says we can transport it into or out of the distillery, the maximum allowed, and it says nothing about whether we made it there. The stuff we make there is what we can sell out the front door. And once we've taken it out of a barrel and finished it and done whatever we're going to do with it, redistilled it, then it's ours, right? And we can legally sell it. But nobody's suggesting that we're going to go buy a case of Jim Beam and try to wholesale, retail it. That's ridiculous. Some of this is my opinion. Let me just finish the historical part of it. I think that what happened in this case is that the right result happened for everybody involved. I dismissed my litigation against the ABC Commission. They dismissed the violation against me. Everybody just went on with their lives, sort of. But the other thing that happened is Agnes Stevens is no longer running ABC Commission as the administrator. And so she apparently is working in the library, which is fine. I think it's really unfortunate because I think I did what I hope was the right thing and came to her and said, look, let's have some common sense. You are the government. You need to exercise common sense. The other thing that happened, sort of the punchline to all of this, when you settle litigation as an attorney, it feels great. Like it's wrapped up. It's all in a bow. You all sign your documents. You file stuff with the courts. It all gets dismissed. Everybody just kind of goes away. And they gave me an order from the ABC Commission saying, now that this is all done, give Mr. Blitz his spirits back. And they emailed that not only to me, and a very nice attorney who happens to live right around the corner from the distillery, who works for the ABC Commission, dropped off a copy of this order signed by the chair of the ABC Commission. Here's your document, Mr. Blitz. Great to meet you in person. He sent that to the ALE agent who sees the stuff, and he sent it to me. And I sent a follow-up email to everybody saying, thanks so much. When can I come pick up my liquor? Not even, when are you going to drop it off? you know, because you stole it from me, like, come bring it back, right? Shouldn't you have to like drop it off? Radio silence. 2 days go by. I'm like, I have my cell phone number. Like, you know where to find me. Like, we're in Google Maps. I send another email. I say, hey, I'm not sure you got my earlier email. Maybe it went to spam. Can you do this? And I did it a third time and I copied his supervisor. And then finally I wrote to his supervisor. No one would respond to me. This is a week. Where's my liquor? Right? Not that I'm being petty. I mean, 17 bottles of liquor. I want it back, right? Just maybe I am being petty. It's the principle of the thing. And I said, look, if you destroyed it, it's no big deal. It's worth about $1,000. You guys will cut me a check. Like, let's move on, right? Yeah, right. They're going to cut a check. Right? Did I mention they get free lawyers? So I call up this very professional, very cordial assistant attorney general. I don't mind telling her name, Amisha Cooper, absolutely fantastic person, very smart, great lawyer. I'm actually litigating against her now on a different ABC issue. She's very, very kind. And I said, listen, Amisha, I hate to bother you with this. I know we've settled this whole thing. I know you don't run ALE. They're not your client in this particular thing. I know we settled this. You did what you said you were going to do. Can you just figure this out? Because I'm going to have to go back to court and enforce this. And the secret truth of everything is, the one thing I gave up in this case that drives me nuts to this day in settling all this stuff is I gave up the right to have a judge define the scope of my rights as a permit holder under our permitting statute, right? That's what I really gave up. I gave up the ability to go into court, pound on the table, argue the law, argue the state constitution, yada, yada, yada. And she says, give me 24 hours, I'll call you back. So she calls me back and she says, I have Seth on the line, who's this other ABC attorney, very nice guy. And they're like, we are so sorry. And I think, oh, the guy destroyed it. It got, thrown out of the evidence locker. It was 2 years ago or whatever. I mean, this has gone on, right? November of 2019, we settled in February of this year. Mr. Blitz, ALE is taking the position that they cannot return your spirits because it would be unlawful for you to possess them under any circumstances. And I'm quiet for a minute. And I said, that is the best news you could have possibly given me. Do you realize now I get to go into court and seek an injunction all over again, and everything you gave up in terms of the violation, I get to relitigate every single part of it. The rules, everything, I get to relitigate it all over again. And this time, I'm not walking away from the attorney's fees. You can take it out of the ALE agent's salary, right? They have all the money in the world, right? If they need more, they know how to get it. And they said, and I quote, "This is not the way we expected this conversation to go." And I said, no, I'm really, really happy. I said, how about you guys try to talk to somebody, take a week, but let them know that I am jumping up and down and clapping my little hands together in glee because I get to go back to court. And they're like, okay, we'll get back to you. And I gave him about 5 days. It was a Friday afternoon when I talked to him. The next Thursday, I was like, you got to call the media, right? This is a job for the media. What a juicy story. 2 parts of state government cannot agree on what the law is, and innocent Mr. Blitz and his 17 bottles of liquor are caught in the balance, right? And it seems so ridiculous at this point, 17 bottles of liquor, but it really is sometimes the principle of the thing, right? Especially when you don't have to pay your lawyer. It's very, principles are cheap when you have, when you're pro se. One journalist whose name I cannot remember at the moment wrote an incredibly in-depth story about the whole thing. And he did what I hoped he would do and called the director of the Department of Public Safety. And if you look at an org chart for the Department of Public Safety. It's absolutely bizarre because there's this, row of boxes across the top and they have a horizontal line connecting them. So they're all at the same level, right? And the ABC Commission is over here. It's an independent commission, but it's part of the Department of Public Safety, I guess, because it's kind of like prisons and other stuff that they do, right? And the crime lab, we'll put liquor in there, right? And then if you go down underneath him and then, like 2 boxes to the left, here's the director of the alcohol law enforcement branch of the Department of Public Safety. And I'm like, just call the guy and say, who's got the right interpretation of the law? That's all I want you to ask him. So he apparently did this. So Thursday, I'm talking to somebody from Spectrum News 14, right? Now, this is huge for a small business like us. Spectrum News 14 actually has pretty good ratings, and they were going to come out on site with cameras and show our place, which is huge. We get the barrels and it's all romantic and great bourbon and, oh, boo-hoo, I'm being persecuted by the government. Come on, buy my bourbon, right? This was going to be great. We have not been able to get any film crews out there. A business I had before, we had lots of television footage. It was amazing. You knew when stuff was airing because the phone would ring off the hook. Thursday afternoon, and this just goes to show you, don't just get your voicemail, just ignore it, right? I get a message from Seth. Mr. Blitz, I have some good news for you. Can you give me a call? And I called him back. And he said, I have good news for you. I have your liquor. And I said, why do you have my liquor? ALE has my liquor. He says, no, I have your liquor. And you can come pick it up from my office. And I said, well, look, can you just throw it in the back of your Jeep? You live like a mile from here. Can you just drop it off? He's like, no, because I'm not sure it's lawful for me to possess it. Right? Okay. And I had to drive down to the state warehouse, which is right next door to the ABC Commission, and like pick up a damaged box of minis, which I would have just written off the $50. But so I come down and pick it up from him. And I said, Seth, you got to tell me, like, how did you come to be in possession of this liquor? And he says, I can't tell you that. I can't tell you. Here, just pick it up. Please take it. Put it in your car. I don't ever want to see you again. And of course, being a person who likes to think they have some integrity, I called up the news station and I said, look, I got to tell you the truth. They just told me they're going to give me my liquor back. So they canceled the shoot. But I think what this all illustrates is that something really bad happens when there's not enough scrutiny of government actors. And it doesn't have to be just people watching and looking in who are just interested citizens. There has to be, and I don't know what the solution to this is. I mean, I have a solution for the distilling industry, but there have to be people who are willing to go to court and push back. Because without that judicial scrutiny, it's very easy for people who are regulators to justify their actions to themselves. And they're not bad people. I honestly think they believe in their mission to control alcohol and make sure it's done right. But they're so far down the rabbit hole of, well, we need to bifurcate your distillery into multiple different zones and set, diagrams where you can store certain things and not store other things. And I'm like, you realize I'm the only person in this state. I have more rights than the state warehouse and the bar down the street and all of these other things under state law. I have all these rights that are in excess of all these other groups. I can grow the grain. I can make liquor out of it. No, I can sell it without ever shipping it to the state warehouse. It's an absolutely unique thing. Why do you want to create a whole bunch of rules that make absolutely no sense for our operations. We're already the most trusted people in this state as far as liquor, and we have the most to lose. And when an ALE agent comes in, and says, well, you might sell a bottle to an underage kid, there is no person in this state less interested in the $30 that would, that's gross, right? So my net on that is going to be much smaller because of all the taxes and everything. Roughly half of your bottles of liquor are taxed. No, but I have zero motivation to do that, right? That $30 means nothing to me compared to an impairment of my license. That's everything to me. So I think for distillers, what I've proposed is that distillers, as part of their membership in the Distillers Association, the dues go up somewhat and the money goes into a kitty, and anybody who's charged with a violation, no matter what it is, gets a free attorney, a right to legal counsel, if you will, but it's not a, and I think that's so critical. And I want to tell you, this was not easy litigation. It was very pitched. I had some great friends who were helping advise me, who were very experienced in this. It ranged across multiple different courts, Office of Administrative Hearings, Superior Court. I had at one point 3 different lawyers all working together against me, plus the rulemaking coordinator is an attorney as well. So it was kind of like, I took on the Department of Justice. That's another windmill I tilted at. And I remember a judge saw me in the courtroom and there's 9 lawyers from the Department of Justice at the one table, and I'm sitting by myself with my little stack of papers. And the judge goes, "You look a little outnumbered, Mr. Blitz." And I said, "Outnumbered, but not outmanned," right? And so I think it's really critical that people really stand up for it. Has there been a change over at the commission? I will tell you, earlier this year, they sent out an informal proposal of rules governing our operations, and they were ridiculous. They would require us to have a separate retail area separated from the rest of our distillery by a full height wall. They want us to build a liquor store within our distillery and separately staff it. And for those of you who've been out to our distillery, you buy a cocktail, you buy a bottle, it's all happens at the same cash register, right? Because otherwise I got to pay twice the number of employees. I got to do $20,000 in remodel, everything else. So those rules came out and the reaction among distillers was huge and loud. And at one point I asked a question of the rulemaking coordinator. I said, are you sending out a request for comments because you want to create an administrative record to support these rules later on? Because I wasn't going to respond, and I don't want you to take our silence as an acquiescence to this. And he gave me some mamby-pamby response. And so basically we told them to just go pound sand, and word got back to us that nobody there really has an appetite to take on the industry at this time. And we've also pursued legislative fixes for some of this stuff. It's been quite an adventure. It really changed the way I look at government. I used to work for the federal courts. I've always sort of been an individual rights person, but this really brought it into sharp relief for me. And I have to say, I've changed my view a lot. And I think that less government is better in almost all cases, unless you're hurting somebody else.
Oh, yeah.
So.
Thank you so much.
Jonathan, that's awesome. Is this mic working?
Yep.
We have time for just a few questions. So does anyone have
I don't know if you can turn that up or hold it. Can you hold it closer?
for Jonathan? You do have a question? All right.
You gotta like bring that.
I may have missed it when I went to John, but you said something about they made these rules that they sprung on you at the last minute. So they did not go through a public notice process like other agencies do.
Absolutely not. It was really fascinating. And actually their emails to me were exhibit A and B. So what they sent out was a document they called the new distillery retail sales policy. Okay. And they sent this out to the rulemaking list and to all the distillers. And what that document said was, and you know what, I may actually have it here. Let me see if I've got it in this. So this is actually here. I'm going to pop this up full screen. These were the rules. In addition to the rules set forth. Okay. So that's just a policy though, right? It's non-binding. Shall be subject to the following policies. Shall submit a written request. Right? Can you guys see that? Oh, I don't know why that's not sharing that. Is that?
Try that again.
Uh-oh, did I just close the wrong thing? Oh, man. Oh, I see. It was sharing the wrong thing. All right, let me see what happens. I apologize. I'm going to take just a second here and do this. Correct.
No worries.
I know you like the dramatic reading. It's so fun.
The more dramatic, the better.
Let's see. Here we go. All right, and this is actually what I submitted to the court and showed the court. So, right. No other act shall be allowed. These look like rules, don't they? So they sent it out to the list and they said, you have 30 days before these take effect. So they're going to take effect September 1st. They sent them out July 30th. Same day they filed against me. God, thank you, God. So good. Shall comply with all requirements applicable to a mixed beverages permittee. So this one little sentence here incorporates like 30 pages of rules, right? You can't batch cocktails. You can't wear a shirt and drink, it's all this stuff, right? Don't you love how it says no portion of the distillery permitted premises shall be used? Wait a minute. That's a rule. There is no way that's not a rule. So no, they didn't do rulemaking. They didn't do anything else. And when the guy was asked, why didn't you go through rulemaking? He says, well, we're still